So I want to share a few examples of what you might encounter when you begin to study Ukrainian grammar. Now I think that actually if you were to compare Ukrainian grammar and English grammar, I would rather be learning Ukrainian as a foreign language than English as a foreign language. I think that English has some aspects that make it more difficult. Now for a lot of Americans or English speakers, when they start to learn Ukrainian, there are some initial humps that can be a little scary. One of them, and I want to just illustrate some of how this works in Ukrainian, one of the things that throws people a lot is the prefixes and suffixes with verbs. Now we have something similar to this. We put lots of words together, and seemingly simple words can have drastically different meanings when they're built up in combination. So for example, you may have read something about the word up in English. If you just take the word up by itself, it means the direction, but if you put it with other words, you can greatly change the meaning of those words. So for example, if I say I'm going to get dressed, I just mean I'm going to put my clothes on and get dressed. But if I say I'm going to get dressed up, the addition of that word up now means you would have the understanding that I'm getting ready for a formal dinner, or I'm going to put a suit on or something special. If you say I'm going to throw something, that just means, throw a ball or whatever, but if you say throw up, that now has a radically different meaning than the other. And as a loose analogy, Ukrainians affect a similar array of meanings in their language by adding prefixes and suffixes to verbs. So for example, one of the toughest ones for people to learn is the verbs of motion, or the verbs of motion. To go, they have a word for to go by foot, and they have another word to go that indicates some kind of transport, car, plane, ship, other. And then they have all these variations like go to, come from, go around, go under, go over. But this, you can cut your teeth with verb conjugations and prefixes with simpler ones. I'm going to give you an example of the verb to do in Ukrainian. So if you look up the verb to do in the dictionary in Ukrainian, the infinitive form is робити. And once you have that, then you can start off with simple things like the past tense, and with various genders. So as a man, if I was going to say I did in the past, I would take the word робити, which is the infinitive, and I would change it to be робив. So I would say I робив something, I did it in the past. If I was a woman, I could say I робила. If I'm speaking of a group, what we did, I can say I or we робили. So you can change the prefix. But then there's other things you can do. There's a difference between saying, for example, what I'm doing right now, or what I will do here maybe in the future sometime. So if I want to say about the future, I can say я зроблю. So for example, if someone came to me and said, hey, why haven't you done this such and such task? And I want to tell them, oh, I'm going to do it. Like I will come and do it right now, or just in a few minutes, or tomorrow. I can say я зроблю, I will do it. So I add this z on the front of it. Or if let's say I have a task that's not finished, and I want to say I'm going to finish the task. Maybe I'm at 75%, so I'm going to take it the remaining 25%. So I can take the word роблю, which is like the I do, and I can add on the prefix, which is the word, it's also the preposition for to. Like if you were going to say I'm going to go to someone's house, the preposition there for to, to, in Ukrainian is do. So I can say I'm going to go do someone's house. So I can put those two together, and the outcome is that I will finish doing it. I will to do it all the way to the end. So I would say я це this дороблю. Like I will finish, or I'll do it to the end. You can say доробити, зробити. We've talked about those two examples. There's a huge number of prefixes that you can put on there to change the meaning of the verb. And when you first start studying verbs, you think, wow, I'll never be able to memorize them all. But that's the trick. Speaking fluently doesn't mean memorizing it all. It means just being familiar with it. You initially learn the basic rules of how prefixes work. So for example, this prefix do, if I add it to the verb робити, до робити, it means to finish something to the end that was started but not yet completed. But I can take that same prefix and I can add it to the word for walk or to drive or go somewhere, до їду, and it means a similar thing. It means like maybe I've started on a trip and I've only traveled 75% of the way, and if I say я доїду, it means like I'll be able to drive all the way to the end. So once you start to see these patterns, you start to learn that, доїду means I'm going to go to the end. Поїду means like I'm gonna travel there tomorrow. Приїду means I'm gonna come here. And you have these prefixes and you'll begin to recognize patterns, and soon you'll sort of get in the rhythm and you'll be able to speak not because you have memorized a massive list of prefixes and suffixes, but because you've begun to feel the pattern, you've begun to feel the system. And like I said in a previous clip, hopefully if you've been speaking with native Ukrainian speakers, you have started to store away some of these chunks of language and you can repeat them. Another taste of the grammar you'll experience in Ukrainian is the area of cases. You'll hear people talk about cases. And cases affect nouns and their modifiers or adjectives. And when I was studying Ukrainian, I actually made a kind of like a grid or a table to help me keep track of all the cases. And I remember in the early days, I felt like I was the Terminator with this overlay in my mind, and I saw the world through cases. But the basic thing to realize is that, like many languages, Ukrainian has genders for nouns, not just people. So all things, like if you have a phone is the male gender, telefon or mobilny. A cup is female, chashka. And so you start out with the gender of a noun, and if you just say like, we'll pick an easy one, like the word for a table is stil. So if you just start out with a noun and you say this is a table, that's first case and nothing changes. It's the form that you would expect to find in the dictionary if you look up the word table. So this is a stil. But when we use a word in a sentence, its ending changes based on the role that it plays in the sentence. If it's the giver of action, the receiver of action, something like that. And that's, to my mind, that's the easiest way to understand cases, is that cases are a way of keeping track of the role that a word, in particular a noun and its modifiers, play in the sentence. So if I just say a simple sentence, this is the table, це стіл, the word steel there is in nominative or first case, and so it's just the root form. But what if I wanted to say that I placed the book on the table, or the book, maybe better to say like the book is laying on the table? Then that part of the sentence, I wouldn't say steel, I would say na, which is the preposition for on, stoli. So the word steel changes to stoli, and that is actually the sixth case, or the locative case. There are other changes. If I said I'm going to kick the table, that would be the accusative case, case 4. For male nouns, it doesn't change, but for female nouns, it does change. So for example, let's take the word for coffee in Ukrainian is kava. It's a female noun, very simple one, very easy to conjugate. So if I say this is a cup of coffee, again that's first case, I would just say це kava, or this is coffee. But if I say I'm going to drink the coffee, now the coffee is receiving action, and that would put it in fourth case. So I would say я п'ю, which is the verb for I drink, каву. So kava with an a at the end, or an a, becomes kavу when it's in fourth case. If I say there is a bug in my coffee, I would say жук в каві, в моїй каві. And that brings us to the discussion of modifiers. When you learn cases, nouns have cases, but the adjectives that modify those nouns also have cases that need to agree with the noun they're modifying. So let's say, for example, I said that this is my coffee. I would say moya kava. And again, it can be confusing at first. Moya is female, not because the speaker is female, but that female relates to the noun that it's modifying. So I would say це моя кава. This is my coffee. But if I wanted to say there is a bug in my coffee, or like maybe let's say think of a sentence like I see a bug in my coffee, then I would say ось бачу жука в моїй каві. So моя кава has to change now to моїй каві. And if I would say, this is kind of contrived, but if I would say I'm going to, I don't know, mop up the floor with my coffee, something instrumental, then I would say моєю кавою. So there are technically 7 cases in Ukrainian, although the 7th in modern Ukrainian is rarely used. It's the like the case of direct address. Most people will say, when you ask them how many cases there are, they'll tell you there are 6 cases in Ukrainian, meaning there are 6 that you would need to use on a daily basis. And so again, initially when you realize that the idea of cases exists and what it means, I remember for me it was a shock when I realized that I couldn't just learn a word once. depending on the word and the gender, there were, maybe half a dozen to a dozen different forms of that same word, and you had to know how to use them correctly. And initially you feel like that it's incumbent upon you to memorize some massive list of endings, not only for nouns, but for the adjectives that modify them. And if you have multiple adjectives that modify a noun, all of them have to agree. You can end up with some pretty crazy rhymes as you go and stack up these adjectives. But again, like with other aspects of the language, what happens is, first of all, you begin to recognize the language chunks, and you begin to speak. That's more the way a native speaker speaks. But secondly, once you learn the rules of the game, you can stop for a second and think, okay, I know this is a female noun. I know how female nouns are formed and how their endings change based on case. And really, at that point, there are not that many variations, and you can do it. It just takes practice. So there's a little bit of taste of Ukrainian grammar. It's a lot of fun. It's worth doing. It's very doable. It's realistic, and I highly recommend it.